a WikiVidi Documentaries production. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Enjoy. Pulp band. Pulp was an English rock band formed in Sheffield in 1978. Their best-known lineup from their heyday consisted of Jarvis Cocker, Candida Doyle, Russell Sr., Mark Webber, Steve Mackey, and Nick Banks. Sr. quit in 1996 and returned for tours in 2011, while Leo Abrahams had been a touring member of the band since they reunited in 2011, contributing electric and acoustic guitar throughout the 1980s. The band struggled to find success, but gained prominence in the UK in the mid-1990s with the release of the albums His and Hers in 1994 and Particularly Different Class in 1995, which reached the #1 spot in the UK albums chart. The album spawned 4 top 10 singles, including Common People and Sorted for S and Wizz, both of which reached #2 in the UK singles chart. Pulp's musical style during this period consisted of disco-influenced pop rock coupled with references to British culture in their lyrics in the form of a kitchen sink drama style. Cocker and the band became reluctant figures in the Britpop movement, and were nominated for the Mercury Music Prize in 1994 for His and Hers. They won the prize in 1996 for Different Class, and were nominated again in 1998 for This Is Hardcore. Pulp headlined the Pyramid stage of the Glastonbury Festival twice and were regarded among the Britpop Big Four, along with Oasis, Blur, and Suede. The band released We Love Life in 2001, after which they entered an extended hiatus, having sold more than 10 million records. Pulp reunited and played live again in 2011, with dates at the Isle of Wight Festival, Reading, and Leeds festivals, Pooda, Seagate Festival, Primavera Sound, the Exit Festival, and the Wireless Festival. A number of additional concert dates have since been added to their schedule. In January 2013, Pulp released After You, a re-recording of a We Love Life demo track, as a digital download single. It was the band's first single released since Bad Cover Version in 2002. On the 9th of March 2014, Pulp and filmmaker Florian Habicht premiered the feature documentary Pulp, a film about life, death and supermarkets at SXSW Music and Film Festival in Austin, Texas. The film toured the International Film Festival circuit and was released theatrically by Oscilloscope Laboratories in the US in November 2014. It is the first film about Pulp that has been made in collaboration with the band. Early years, 1978-1983. A 15-year-old Jarvis Cocker and his friend Peter Dalton, who was 14, conceived the band at the City School in Sheffield. Cocker's original preference was to name the band after the film Pulp starring Michael Caine, though it was decided that this was too short. Instead, the two took inspiration from a copy of the Financial Times which listed the Arabica's coffee bean in its commodity index. Cocker and Dalton used this, with a slight spelling change, and the band became Arabicus. Early rehearsals took place in Cocker's house and featured Cocker, Dalton and Dalton's younger brother Ian. After finally deciding on Arabicus Pulp, a fixed lineup was then established: Cocker, Dalton and 2 friends of theirs, David Lockwood and Mark Swift. The band played their first public gig at Rotherham Arts Centre in July 1980. Later that year, Cocker met future member Russell Sr., who recognized Cocker from his charismatic sales techniques in his part-time job at the local fish market. Their musical style at this time was varied, approximately described as a cross between ABBA and The Fall. A local fanzine also noted this eclecticism, describing them as sounding as if they listened to the John Peel Show every night in an endless quest for influences. Indeed, in October 1981, they gave a demo tape to Peel, who granted them a Peel session. The session was a giant leap forward for the young band, who became well known on the local music scene as a result. The tracks recorded were in the typical Sheffield sound of the time: electronic new wave and post-punk. These tracks were released in 2006 on the Peel Sessions compilation. Despite their exposure on national radio, success was not forthcoming and, apart from Cocker, most of the core lineup left for university. Soon, a new set of musicians was gathered: Simon Hinkler, David Hinkler, Wayne Furness, Peter Boam, Gary Wilson, and Cocker's sister, Saskia. They managed to get enough local backing to record a mini-album in late 1982. Entitled It, which was released in April 1983 by Red Rhino Records. This largely consisted of folkish, romantic pop songs influenced by Leonard Cohen and was a change of direction from the Peel sessions 2 years earlier. The album was later released by Cherry Red Records. Though it failed commercially and fame was still elusive, the band continued to seek commercial success even to the point of recording a single, Everybody's Problem, There Was. The single demonstrated a style shift advised by Red Rhino's Tony Perrin, who had convinced Cocker that he could write commercial songs like Wham! This approach also failed, and Cocker was becoming unhappy with his chosen musical direction. He was set to break up the band and go to university himself before a practice with Russell Sr. and Magnus Doyle led to the establishment of a new, more experimental, artier and noisier direction for Pulp. They were subsequently augmented by Peter Mansell and Tim Alcott. Independent Days, 1984-1991. The new incarnation of Pulp survived a number of ill-fated gigs before Alcott left to be replaced on keyboards by Magnus Doyle's sister Candida. Following her first performance with the band, they were signed to Fire Records. Soon after signing to Fire, in November 1985, Cocker fell out of a window while trying to impress a girl with a Spider-Man impression and ended up in hospital, temporarily requiring the use of a wheelchair in which he appeared during concerts. Pulp's relationship with Fire Records was tempestuous, and Cocker admitted later that the band only accepted the deal as it was the only offer on the table. During this period, the singles, Little Girl, and Dogs Are Everywhere, were released. Pulp's next major release was Freaks, an album recorded in 1 week due to record label pressure. Cocker was irritated, and remarked that the songs could have been done a lot better if we'd have had a bit more time. The release of Freaks ended up being delayed for a year, and the record was not well received. The album's darker style may be considered the antithesis of the happy and optimistic It. When Freaks failed to be a success, Pulp recorded tracks with Chak's label Fon in Sheffield. A single called Death Comes to Town was due to be released by Fon in early 1988, but this relationship disintegrated and the release was cancelled. It was during this time that Cocker was taking a part-time foundation course at Sheffield Polytechnic. This led to him leaving for London to study film at Central St Martin's College of Art and Design, effectively folding the band. The fold was short-lived, however. Steve Mackey, a regular at their Sheffield and London gigs, was also studying in London and was asked to join the band as a bass player. The lineup now consisted of Cocker, Mackey, Sr., Candida Doyle, Nick Banks. In mid-1989, they began recording another album for Fire, this time with a bigger budget and production from Alan Smith, called Separations. This was a progression of the style of Freaks, with Leonard Cohen-esque ballads on side 1 and an acid house-infused track listing on side 2. The disparate styles can be attributed to Cocker and Mackey's different and changing tastes. Mackey introduced Cocker to house music, which led to them both going to raves, while Cocker introduced Mackey to Scott Walker and Serge Gainsbourg. Like Freaks, the release of Separations was delayed, to an extent lessening the potential impact. In the meantime, however, in 1991, a 12 recording, My Legendary Girlfriend, became music periodical NME's Single of the Week. Stuart Mackey described it in his review as a throbbing ferment of nightclub soul and teen opera. Furthermore, Countdown began to be mentioned in the mainstream press. Galavan, Joseph. Rock/Gig Guide. The Independent. The 29th of August 1991. Heralding a turning point in Pulp's quest for fame. Commercial height, 1992-1996. Pulp's repertoire was growing rapidly. Tracks such as Babies, Space, and She's a Lady were being played live throughout 1991, and in October of that year, they played their first overseas gig, a concert organized by French magazine Les Inrocuptibles. However, the band was still frustrated that Separation still had not seen a release, and so Pulp left Fire and signed to Warp Records' imprint Gift Records in 1992. Buoyed by a changing musical current, in June 1992 Pulp released OU on Gift, while Fire finally released Separations in the same month. Melody Maker made OU a single of the week alongside The Drowners by Suede, a prominent new band. Pulp then signed to Island Records, who jointly released the singles Babies and Razzmatazz to increasing chart success. Next were the singles Lip Gloss and their first top 40 hit on the UK singles chart, Do You Remember the First Time?, which were put out as full island releases. These singles were followed by the Ed Buller-produced album, His and Hers, which reached number 9 on the UK Albums Chart and was nominated for the Mercury Music Prize. This sudden increase in popularity was helped by the massive media interest in Britpop alongside acts such as Suede, Oasis, and Blur, with Pulp supporting the latter in a 1994 tour of the United States. 1995 saw the peak of Pulp's fame, with the release of their number 2 single on the UK singles chart, Common People, in May 1995, and their performance in June at the Glastonbury Festival. A double A-side single, Sorted for S and Wizz/Ms Shapes, was to precede the release of their next album, Different Class. Upon the release of Sorted for S and Wizz, the Daily Mirror printed a front-page story headed, Ban This Sick Stunt, alongside a story by Kate Thornton which said the song was pro-drugs, and called for the single to be banned. The single had an inlay which showed how to conceal amphetamines in a DIY app. Cocker released a statement 2 days later saying: "Sorted is not a pro-drugs song. Nowhere on the sleeve does it say you are supposed to put drugs in here, but I understand the confusion. I don't think anyone who listens to Sorted would come away thinking it had a pro-drugs message." The single reached number 2 on the UK single charts. Released in October 1995, Different Class garnered significant critical praise and debuted at the top of the UK album chart. This was the first album featuring Pulp fan club president Mark Webber, who became a permanent member of the band on guitar and keyboards. The album followed similar themes to their previous work, with observations of life expressed through Cocker's sexualized, sometimes dark and witty lyrics. Other singles released from Different Class were Disco 2000 and Something Changed, which reached numbers 7 and 10 respectively in the UK. In September 1996, Different Class won the Mercury Music Prize. It was at this time that Cocker gained significant media exposure due to a notorious prank at the 1996 Brit Awards, where he invaded the stage in protest during pop singer Michael Jackson's performance of Earth Song and wiggled his backside at the audience. After complaints by Jackson and his entourage, Cocker spent the night in Kensington Police Station charged with actual bodily harm and assaulting the child performers. However, with British comedian and former solicitor Bob Mortimer acting as legal representation, he was released without charge. This incident propelled Cocker into great controversy in the UK and elsewhere, and Pulp's record sales soared as a result. The event also coincided with the beginning of their first arena tour, and the Daily Mirror, who had attacked the band months earlier, set up a "Justice for Jarvis" campaign backing his actions and carried out a stunt at Pulp's Sheffield arena gig on the 29th of February, handing out free t-shirts. The NME described Cocker's actions as a great publicity stunt, which was creative, subversive, and very, very funny, while Melody Maker described Cocker as arguably the 5th most famous man in Britain, and suggested he should be knighted. In March 1996, a compilation of Pulp's early recordings on Fire Records entitled Countdown 1992-1983 was released on the Nectar Masters label. It received largely negative reviews, but due to the band's popularity at the time it reached the top 10 of the UK charts. Cocker, whose permission was not sought before release, urged fans not to purchase the album. comparing it to a garish old family photograph album. Later in 1996, Pulp gained minor international recognition on the back of the inclusion of the track, Mile End, on the Trainspotting soundtrack. In August, the band played their last public performance for almost 2 years as headliners of the 1996 V Festival. The band also played a gig in the Shetland Islands, as arguably the most high-profile band to do so. Until breakup, 1997-2002. It was during this period of intense fame and tabloid scrutiny that longtime member and major innovator in the band's sound Russell Sr. decided to leave the band, saying, "It wasn't creatively rewarding to be in Pulp anymore." The band were due to begin working on a new album in late 1996. However, Cocker was having difficulty with a celebrity lifestyle, battling cocaine addiction, and a breakup of a long-term relationship. When the band came to begin work on the next album, they had only one song, Help the Aged. This creative inertia meant the band took over a year to finish the next record. Indeed, it was Cocker's disillusionment with his long-desired wish for fame that made up much of the subject matter of This Is Hardcore, which was released in March 1998. The album took a darker and more challenging tone than that of different class and lyrical topics. Pornography, fame and the after-effects of drugs were dealt with more earnestly than on previous records. Also in 1998, Pulp collaborated with Patrick Doyle on the song, Like a Friend, for the soundtrack to the film Great Expectations. The song was also used in the Adult Swim cartoon The Venture Brothers Season 4 finale, Operation Prom. Pulp then spent a few years in the wilderness, before reappearing in 2001 with a new album, We Love Life. The extended period between the release of This Is Hardcore and We Love Life is partly attributed to having initially recorded the songs which comprise the album and being dissatisfied with the results. Subsequent interviews also suggested interpersonal and artistic differences, including managing the fallout of the Britpop/different class era. Singer/songwriter Scott Walker agreed to produce the record, and this symbolized a new phase in Pulp's development. This new effort fell short of expectations and was to be Pulp's last. Pulp subsequently undertook a tour of the national parks in the UK, even playing a show as far north as Elgin in Scotland. Richard Hawley, the Sheffield-based singer/songwriter, was also present on various dates on this tour. He later described it as very much pink feather boas and glamour, which was great and brilliant. That was about trying to find glamour among all the shit, and I loved all that. In 2002 the band announced that they were leaving their label, Island. A greatest hits package was released, Tits, with one new track. It is unclear whether this was the band's decision or released to satisfy contractual agreements. A music festival, Auto, was organized where they played their last gig before embarking on a 9-year hiatus. After breakup, 2003-2010, Cocker was involved in a number of one-offs and side projects, including the group Relaxed Muscle with Jason Buckle in the film Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, where he fronted a group which included Steve Mackey and members of Radiohead. In 2006 he collaborated with Air, Neil Hannon and Charlotte Gainsbourg on her album entitled 555. In 2007 he appeared on Air's album Pocket Symphony, co-writing and giving vocals to the tracks One Hell of a Party and The Duelist. His first solo album, Jarvis, with the participation of Mackey, was released to critical acclaim in November 2006. Candida Doyle has performed live with Cocker on his solo tours. Mackey produced tracks on the debut album by M.I.A. Ruler and on Someone to Drive You Home by the Long Blondes, both of which were critically well received. He has also produced tracks for Bromehead's Jacket and Florence and the Machine. On the 11th of September 2006 the band re-released 3 of their albums, each with a bonus disc of B-sides, demos and rarities. On the 23rd of October 2006 a 2-CD set compiling all of Pulp's John Peel sessions from 1982 to 2001 was released. Reunion, 2011-2013. In November 2010 it was announced that the different class lineup would be playing at the Wireless Festival in London's Hyde Park and a Saturday slot at the Isle of Wight Festival in 2011. In a message sent to the band's official mailing list on the 1st of January 2011, Cocker said the large amount of interest in the band's reunion had been an inspiration, and that he was pleased with how rehearsals were going. The band announced 22 concerts between May and September 2011, taking place in Europe and Australia. Pulp were one of the surprise special guests at Glastonbury Festival 2011 in June, where they played on the Park stage on Saturday evening. They performed at the Sziget Festival in Hungary on the 10th of August. Way Out West Festival in Sweden on the 13th of August, and played as co-headliners to The Strokes at the Reading Festival and the Leeds Festival during the final weekend of August 2011. They headlined the Electric Picnic on the 4th of September, their last festival of the year. On the 9th of January 2012, the Coachella Festival lineup was released, with Pulp listed as part of the lineup. Further dates were announced, including a concert at the Royal Albert Hall in support of the Teenage Cancer Trust. Senior did not take part in the 2012 gigs. In February 2012, It, Freaks and Separations were reissued. These editions came with bonus tracks, including Death Goes to the Disco, Dogs Are Everywhere, and Sink or Swim. In April 2012, in an interview with Shortlist magazine, Cocker said that he was working on ideas for new Pulp songs. Pulp announced in July 2012 that they would be playing a one-off concert in their hometown of Sheffield in December that year, at the 13,500 capacity Motorpoint Arena. Cocker stated in an interview with Q in November 2012 that the band has no plans whatsoever to release new material, and would be cruising off into the sunset at the end of the year, signaling a possible end to the reunion. On the 25th of December 2012, Pulp made a previously unreleased track, After You, available for download to individuals who had attended the Sheffield concert, and was subsequently released to the general public on the 28th of January 2013 via digital download. The song had previously only existed in demo form. Their last performance was to promote the song on the Jonathan Ross Show on the 9th of February 2013. The remixed version of After You by Soulwax later went on to be used in the 2013 video game Grand Theft Auto 5 as a track on the in-game radio station, Soulwax FM. In May 2015, a music heritage plaque was unveiled at the venue of the band's first gig, the Lead Mill, Sheffield. Band members Jarvis Cocker, Nick Banks, Steve Mackey, Candida Doyle and Mark Webber were present at the ceremony. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Would you like to know more?